Hi, I'm Danielle Radoichin, and thanks for joining me on this episode of In Talks With, which relates the fascinating life story of Cinzia Ruggeri, the artist and fashion designer whose free-spirited creativity saw her achieve extraordinary success during the 1970s and 80s, only for her to walk away and, since her death, be largely forgotten by the wider creative community. So who was Cinzia Ruggeri? Born in Milan in 1942 into an industrial manufacturing family, she studied applied arts, interned for the fashion label Carven in Paris, and worked at her father's tailoring company before setting up on her own and designing successful menswear and womenswear collections throughout the 70s and 80s. Although her work was widely acclaimed and in demand, she became disillusioned with the commercial constraints of retail manufacturing and left the world of fashion at the end of the 80s to concentrate on her work as a product designer and to teach and work on installations. Although never formally part of an artistic movement, she was closely connected with the radical design scene in Milan and was an associate of the Memphis Group, the famous 80s design movement, a connection which is immediately evident if you look at her work. And the work does feel familiar, even if the artist behind it is not. Perhaps her most recognisable piece is an emerald green dress featuring a step ziggurat or zigzag line along its edge, a common motif in postmodern design of the 1980s, and which is held in the permanent collection at the Victoria and Albert Museum. She was also one of the first designers to experiment with electronic technologies, incorporating liquid crystals, LED lights and kinetic movement into her garments and artworks. She died in 2019. In April 2022, Macro, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Rome, mounted the first major retrospective of Ruggeri's work, curated by its creative director, Luca Lopinto. This exhibition travelled to Goldsmiths Centre for Contemporary Arts last autumn in London, where it will remain on show until the end of February 2023. I sat down with Luca at the Goldsmiths space to hear about his take on Cinzia and what it is about her work that resonates so strongly today. I should also add that there is a very handsome catalogue published to accompany the exhibition, and a link to which I'll include in the episode's show notes. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hi Luca.
Hi.
Thanks for joining me on the In Talks With podcast. We are in the Goldsmiths Centre for Contemporary Art in southeast London. It's very chilly in here and outside. But we're here to talk about Cinzia Says, which is the first major retrospective of the Italian artist and fashion designer Cinzia Ruggeri, whose name I'm trying to pronounce.
The way you pronounce it is fantastic. She would have loved that.
Did you ever meet her?
I met her once, briefly.
So she lived from 1942 to 2019. So who was Cinzia Ruggeri?
So Cinzia Ruggeri was a creative person, I would say. So a total artist. I mean, he's almost a Wagnerian type of artist that did sort of everything during her life. She had her very first show as an artist when she was 18 in Milano. She grew up in Milano. And so she exhibited a number of paintings in a gallery in Milano, and she was able to convince a very influential writer in Italy at the time, Dino Buzzati, to write the text. Then she went to Paris for a short stage at Carven, and when she went back to Milano, she started to work in the fashion industry. She had the father was into that business, so she had already some kind of connection. And when she was very young, she founded her first label, and which was Bloom, and after it, Cinzia Ruggeri. Let's say that she worked in the fashion world for until 88, when she quit that world, because I think she was any more satisfied. There wasn't anymore the possibility of experimenting, and so she also started to produce furniture, objects, doing small works, and so in a way, she did many things, and so was as I said, a very creative person. So could be fashion, could be art, could be design, and could be interior design. These were just tools to express like her creativity. And to me, when I discovered her work, was really an epiphany. And I think today it's very rare to find someone with such a strong personal vision, because we live in a world of copycats, of also things that looks interesting, but at the end you realize that are just sort of posers or something that is kind of academic. She's a truly non-academic person, and she also have a very open attitude towards her own history. So she was always kind of rewriting her history. So I really like this aspect. I like to approach the artwork as not a finish and define object or thing, but as a raw material that you can every time kind of using and presenting in a different way. And so to me, like making exhibitions is such an exciting thing, because this idea of mise en scène, of that you have certain elements that could be objects or non-objects, could be garments, clothes, or a cup of coffee, whatever, and you can write in that space, and that space could be a page of a book or could be a wall of a museum. And you can every time with the same ingredients you can cook something different, and which is something very simple, but sometimes we forget how the potentiality of this language that is making exhibitions. And to me, Cinzia, she really was also into the idea of making exhibitions for that precise reason. And unfortunately she passed away, and so she, in a moment where she started to have also a kind of new recognition, and so she had within 5 years quite, I'd say, a good number of shows, and you really can see how incredible was the way she was reinventing the possibility of doing something that is also hard to define what it is. And to me, that's the most exciting part too, because now it seems that we live in a time where everything is very fluid, and where there is a kind of always a mix of disciplines. The museums are sort of ongoing festivals where you go, you can have good food, you can go to a concert.
Yeah, people don't want to be defined or pigeonholed as much. Yeah.
But at the end, I feel that we live in also in a kind of conservative time compared to what is the storytelling about contemporary culture. While Cinzia,
definitely compared to her at the time she was when she was most productive, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think she was also very much ahead of her time. The idea that in 1986 she launched a menswear collection, and she named the collection Cinzia Ruggeri.
Instead of Cinzia, which is her name, yeah.
Or like she decided to present a collection instead of doing a classical runaway. She did a runaway for the camera, so supposed to be perceived for the camera as a video.
I'm just thinking about where all this sort of sense of humor and creativity came from. She grew up in Milan in an industrial manufacturing family. What was her upbringing like?
She grew up. Cinzia's mother was from Austria, so I think she had this half kind of Austrian influence in terms of culture, and the other Milanese. And Milano is also a city very much influenced by the idea of design. You know?
So there was a lot of that happening throughout the 50s, 60s, especially when she would have been growing up.
Yeah, and also I feel that also she was influenced both from like historical avant-gardes like surrealism, but at the same time from more contemporary stuff like Italian radical architecture, or someone like James Wines from Sight. And she grew up, I would say, in a kind of bourgeoisie sort of context, and but she was always kind of very flamboyant, a sort of a person, and also quite precise in a way.
Did she have siblings?
Sorry?
Did she have any brothers and sisters?
No.
So she was an only child.
Yeah.
And did she have like a kind of formal or traditional education, or were her parents exposing her a lot to more kind of
she
creative, artistic stuff?
In Milano, she studied like a bit of economy, a bit arts, but also she was never so keen of saying too much about her education, or she was always trying to keep a kind of element of mystery. And I mean, for the exhibition in Rome and in London, we produce a huge book, a monograph, like 400 pages.
So we should probably say that this exhibition here is, you've taken some of the pieces from the original exhibition, which is at Macro in Rome.
Yeah, so Cinzia says started in Rome at Macro, the Museum of Contemporary Art.
Where you're the creative
Yeah,
director.
where I'm the artistic director.
Artistic director.
But I like the idea of being creative director of a museum. If the museum, we can consider the museum a sort of label. And yeah, in Rome, the show took place in a huge space, 1,000 square meters, and was a sort of a single landscape made of different elements. So there was no wall, and so everything was really about juxtaposed to each other, so you can catch everything with just a single kind of how do you say, sight?
Yeah, all in your eye line, in the same eye line.
Yeah.
You can sort of almost like a panoramic view. You can see everything. There are no divisions.
No division. There was moving lights, sound, music, and here at Goldsmiths, of course, the space is very different because it's on 2 floors, different rooms, so it's very kind of articulated, the architecture, and so here it's more about having a sequence of rooms with a different kind of feeling. And yeah, so the exhibition in Rome was bigger than this one in London. Here is more, have this combination of rooms where you have, in one room there is the one entire collection, which is Fluxus, and then downstairs we presented the very last exhibition Cinzia did, which is titled Le regole del gioco, the rules of a game, which is an homage to the wonderful movie by Jean Renoir, Les règles de jeu. And so was, I think it was important to me also to present Cinzia without filter, in a way. And that installation, it's really like a bit the heritage of Cinzia vision in terms of an exhibition she did. And but when you organize an exhibition on about artists like Cinzia, it's really a big challenge to be in that thin threshold between doing something following the artist attitude in her spirit, and at the same time you have to think that you're introducing an author who is unknown to the most of the
Yeah.
people.
And I'm just going back to her sort of youth, and it just struck me, it was quite extraordinary for a woman at that time, age 17 or 18, to have an exhibition of her own then. I mean, she must have been quite a force of nature. How important do you think her sex was to who she was, and what kind of limitations would she have been facing?
I think was important because she always kind of celebrated an idea of femininity, very. It's hard to say now, but I think she was a kind of against to the feminist, contemporary feminist storytelling, or because she was a truly kind of feminist in the sense of being a very strong woman and working in a world where there were mostly men. I mean, thinking about the Italian fashion, you have Armani, Versace, Ferré. So it was only Cinzia, and I would say Crizia. So, but then she had this very. You can feel through also if you look at the clothes that for her fashion was a way of expanding the character, the attitude of a person, and especially of women. And so also when you read the interview, the way she was kind of appearing, I think she was also a bit shy, but the way, I mean, that her persona was then appearing was very, how do you say, very empowered.
Sort of empowered. She felt empowered. I mean, I think when even just going and moving to France and getting a job, even for a woman to work in 1977, she set up her own label. So she would have been, what, in her 30s? Then?
Yeah, she was 30 years, basically, yeah.
Even then, I mean, that was still, even though obviously well into second wave feminism by then, but that was still probably quite unusual for a woman just to go ahead and from Italy and set up her own label. I mean, was she influenced by anyone when she was in Paris? I mean, I know she worked at Carven, the fashion label, for a while, but did she ever talk about influences that were, or what inspired her to start her own label?
I don't know, because she had a partner, a business partner at the time when she founded Bloom, and she started at the beginning. She was more kind of keen on the material, and that's also another interesting element that you feel almost being this kind of conceptual fashion, where you have all these elements, animals, things, each garment is a different story. So if you're wearing that thing, is also about your mood of the day. One day you can wear like a pig or like eyes on the back of your sweater. And but then if you look carefully and you see that each garment is very beautifully fabricated. So it's not that you go, I don't know, to a cheap shop and you're not interested in the shirt, but more in the details that you are attaching to that. So it's a very kind of high-end type of of garments. Also with the furniture objects, some, or I would say most of the furniture objects are kind of prototypes because were very expensive to produce. But she was always collaborating with sort of big kind of companies like Vanity Cats. Is Poltrona Frau, is a chair with all these cats on top with lights. It's amazing, but I mean it's also expensive to produce.
So was she able to support herself commercially? Like, was she economically and commercially successful?
Yeah, I mean, she also opened a shop in Washington called Cinzia Ruggeri, but Cynthia Hia. So playing a lot with names, but it's very I feel that the fashion world in the mid 70s, mid late 70s was a great field and space to experiment. And already after 5 years, 83, 84, it became a proper huge kind of industry. I'm thinking also about the Italian fashion. And that's why in 88 she felt okay.
So she wasn't ever accepted as part of the mainstream fashion world?
I mean, she was presenting her collection together with the. I mean,
she presented during the main collections in Milan or in Paris.
Yeah, in Milano. She also, I mean, she was really in that system. Of course, was the one that where the buyers or like the journalists were saying, okay, the best, the most crazy and creative presentation. But very difficult to buy, you know. So for the buyers was something not easy, even
because
for
it was
that time.
Not easy to buy because people found it difficult to understand, or.
I mean, for the buyers, when you have to buy, you know, you go to the runaways, and then you have to buy, you know, decide, okay, I want to buy, I don't know, 50 trousers for the shop.
So she couldn't produce as many as they wanted? Or?
I think was limited. Honestly, this is also still, to me, is also an ongoing question to understand how many of that, I don't know, jackets were produced. Because she kept folders for each collection with all the press clippings and archival material, but also during this long research that was done together also with two persons that one work for you of the university and the other one Laura Salvo, who work with Cinzia with the gallery that is still representing the archive, Federico Assori, and they did all this huge research, but wasn't clear this.
Because it must have been an enormous job in itself, just trying to track down.
Was crazy also because imagine Cinzia bought kind of storage, and then she had a huge wardrobe where she that was filled up with hundreds of clothes, and when she was alive, she never presented that thing. So for her, like the fashion chapter of her life was a closed one.
She has that famous piece in the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, the homage to Levi Strauss, which is an image that's been used so much. And I think of that one as being preserved very well.
Yeah,
the green ziggurat dress. But
I like the idea that both in Rome and here we presented basically almost everything she did.
It's amazing.
Except for that is the V&A.
That's
but
okay,
was hard
you
to
can
get.
go to the V&A to see that.
Yeah, it makes sense. That was the cover of the album of Mattia Bazar, this pop band from the 80s, and so a very iconic. Yeah.
So was that image created for the album cover?
It was used for the cover of that band, and also she worked with them on for some concerts, and also she worked in the early 80s with Alchimia and Occhio Magico photographic studio, and together they made some covers for Domus, the architectural magazine founded by Gio Ponti. And
you've got some of those on the walls downstairs.
Yeah, we used some spreads from the book.
That's very effective. Blown up very big.
Yeah,
it's nice. And also because she brought such. I mean, obviously there you could feel the influence of some of the artistic movements happening contemporaneously with when she was working, like the Memphis Group or the Radical Art Movement. But she seems to never have settled on with she was sort of associated with some of these movements, but she doesn't seem to have ever sort of become part. Seems to have been resistant to being formally part of some of these movements.
Yeah. I think she's an outsider in a deep sense of the word. Of course, Milano at that time, you had Memphis with Sozzas, you had Alessandro Mendini, you have all these amazing designers, artists. Also, she was also friend of architects and artists. I think she also used, for instance, a work by Gianni Piacentino, who is an artist that had been showing in the late 60s with the artists of Arte Povera. And but yeah, she never wanted to be kind of labeled as part of a movement or a group. And also she worked a lot for the theater. She collaborated a lot with Valeria Malli, this dancer, so she designed costumes for several shows Magli did. And so, I mean, she did many collaboration. And I feel that was, when you're so creative and you're always kind of in the flow of imagining things. So almost a kind of animist way of that the table and the mic I'm talking to could become, I don't know, you can customize and you can be something.
Yeah, because I think I read a nice quote where she said something along the lines of most things have already been created with a practical purpose. So what I like to do is give them something extra, which is almost like a surreal added element.
Yeah, it's I feel that often they're very kind of funny.
Yeah, so let's talk about the humor, because that is something that you don't come across in fashion that often.
There is a lot of humor, and also I would say often I feel some objects and they're kind of uncanny,
Yeah.
What's
an example of one of those?
Because you see something for, I don't know, some garment and then you turn around and there is another element. So there is this kind of twist, and it's. You say that there is no humor in fashion, yes, or when there is, it seems that it's not spontaneous. It's like more kind of pretentious. And that's the beautiful part of Cinzia. And if we think about Virgil Abloh, when was appointed the designer for Louis Vuitton for LVMH, was not a problem to keep also his more underground, if we want to call it underground, off-white label. And that's to me a very interesting element, because today, for like the mainstream corporate fashion, like LVMH, was important to keep this kind of underground, not to say, okay, now you have to quit your own label and go and you have to work just for us. And we live in this specific time that is very different from when Cinzia was she was really free. And also the idea of like quitting that fashion world, because she was a kind of outsider within the system. Mm-hmm. She was not someone doing, a few things, a bit kind of do-it-yourself attitude, She was
an insider.
An insider. That's an important element.
That's interesting. So it was a very deliberate choice to be the way she was. It wasn't. Yeah, that's really interesting. Also, just thinking about obviously when I was walking around this exhibition here, there are some obvious thoughts that come into my head, like Schiaparelli and the elements of surrealism. And I know she's influenced lots of designers over the years. Like, it's often commented on the Victor and Rolf, like the bed dress, which is the dress where the model comes out with a pillow behind her head. But also she was quite innovative in her use of technology. you have a dress hanging here in the exhibition, which has, I'm not sure if they are LED lights, but
Yeah.
they are lights that sort of turn on and off.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you think about designers today, like Hussein Chalayan or Iris von Herpen, who are kind of playing a lot with technology, but I suppose, I mean, how important was that kind of stuff to her? Was she quite sort of, was it all part of her instinctive thing, or was she actively going out and finding all this new tech?
I think she was never a nostalgic person. So the idea that you can employ technology and it's great. So as you said, she was influenced on one end by like historical avant-gardes, and so she was very classic. Maybe that's the Austrian influence, but then she always lived in the present, you know. And that's something to me important. And also when you look at the exhibition that is covering more than 35 years, almost 40 years of work, I would say that it's hard to understand, to position the different elements into a specific time. And that's the beautiful part of it. It's not only about, this is the 80s, postmodern, like the excess and the fact that she's always kind of ambivalent, that looks something, but at the end, if you spend a bit of time, you understand like how she was interested in the idea of couture, even if they look very kind of, you know, more conceptual in the spirit, you know, that is not about there the point. So if you wear, I mean, you feel like, that's why we decided to present the videos of the runaways. You have a feeling of how you look wearing this. So you look like fabulous, and it's very sexy, it's very feminine. I mean, you have so it's not only that you feel that you are kind of a vessel to convey the message of a garment that is only about kind of being extravagant or and to me, this is the strongest aspect that is very hard to catch, and is every time you tend to position into a specific line of influence, of history, or you say yes, but at the same time you say no, and also I'm really excited that this show is within the context of a university. Because
so Goldsmiths University is just next door. Yeah.
Because now people like Cinzia are very important voices to really have a feeling like strong to experiment, and not feeling always to experiment into this sort of academic spirit. Because now you're taught to look non-academic, which is a completely schizophrenic thing. But this is what you see, and also the artwork more and more, especially in the last 10 years, show a strong interest towards applied arts, fashion, and so on. Imagine that only in the 80s, when Ingrid Sisch, she was the director of our forum, for the first time, fashion was in the cover of our forum. Never happened before, only in the 80s. So, and also sometimes the artwork is the way it's presenting outsider figures or figures from other disciplines. They tend to a bit flat that spirit, you know. Sometimes they use it because it's the time to do that, not because they're just really convinced.
Like yeah. And that's a really interesting idea. I think it is that really, you've really summed up why she's important now, and it's a very compelling case. Just quickly, I wanted to ask you a bit earlier in this conversation, why did she turn her back on fashion and move more into doing installations and artwork? Was there a reason, or was it just an instinct?
I feel that she started to be about and she started to feel not so excited anymore about fashion as a as a tool of expression. And at a certain moment she had an existential crisis. So she left Milano. She moved to Puglia. She loved the sea, to live in front of the sea, and so she spent 10 years there. And then when she moved back to Milano, she started to teach fashion at NABA, the university, and during that time she never stopped thinking, creating. Also, she worked for a local shop in Puglia, so she was really kind of never into of being recognized or working for the fancy design or art gallery, because exactly for the reason I mentioned before, that she was an insider. I mean, she was an outsider of a system, but she was into an industry. Um, uh, it's different of, the fashion is not like something that you can compare to art. So I feel she was kind of annoying, and the pressure you have is very different. So the possibility of, I don't know, just designing an object or thinking about an installation, but she always conceived everything in that spirit. So also when she was designing the invites for the fashion presentation, were always very kind of special. And also now you have all the different fashion labels that are doing crazy type of invites. The one that is sending a chocolate with your name, and you find under the pillow of your hotel that they're paying to having you at the. And so you can have a credit card with your name, with any crazy things. But again, you feel that everything was not a corporate thing. Was just was very everything was very coherent, So the idea of having designing objects or customizing on paper invitations or doing the clothes was always. So what changed in a certain moment, she stopped that, but already before she was designing kind of objects from the thing is that she in a way abandoned that world. And through the book where we have a long kind of chronology where for each year is listed all the exhibitions she did, all the collection, all the object. You can have a better overview of that. And so it's also funny to see images of not only of the runaways, but she was also president of the Association of Silk, and so she was inviting other people to design, like, I don't know, all these events, classical events, where for her were a possibility to do something. She was having fun, also, but having fun in a kind of precise way.
Yeah. What about personal life? Was she ever married, or does she have children?
Yeah. Two children. One, Angus, is alive. The other one, unfortunately, passed away. And Angus is also in charge of the archive of the state. And she had several relationships.
And what were the circumstances under which you met her? You said you met her once.
I met her once in Milano when she had this show at Corso Como, and it's also the time where I discover her work. And so I entered really randomly, and there was this show called Chin Chin. There was a show, and I say, what's this? Because I was very impressed by the use of the space. And then we just through email. I included her work in a small group show I did in Rome, and then when I was
that's when she was still alive.
Yeah.
Yep.
And when I was appointed director of Macro, was in the program from day one, but in a way I didn't inform her at the beginning. Was like the program that I had in mind that I presented when I've been appointed. Was Cinzia Ruggeri as a show for the main space, and unfortunately, we didn't have the opportunity to work together on this show, and I think would have been very special. Also, I always wonder what Cinzia would think of every single thing. Because for me, the most crucial thing is to be respectful and of the artist, of the spirit of the artist. So I don't want to imitate Cinzia, because I'm not Cinzia, I'm not an artist. At the same time, I don't want to turn that work into a kind of a dead, mausoleum. And so it's really hard to find that balance. And as I said before, she's, I would say, unknown to the majority of the people. And so it's important also to give a kind of overview that you understand certain elements. And but at the same time, the fact that you see the exhibition, everything is more or less juxtaposed. So in the rooms, you see ties, you see posters, you see bags, and you see mirrors, you see hands. Also, very often these furniture objects you can present either more as a sort of sculptures between brackets, or in their functionality as sofa. And also this is very generous, because if you buy something and you can play with that, she designed a wonderful chair called Una sola moltitudine, a single multitude. Is a chair with different kind of pillows, and you can choose the order of the pillow every day according to your mood. And so it's I like that it's you as a person that you're buying, I don't know, her clothes, or you buy her chair, you're not just a passive consumer of that. You can play with that. There is a room for you to say something, and that's very beautiful. And so while it's very different of wearing a t-shirt saying, I don't know, a message, a statement, because I feel that I'm used by someone to convey a message, while I think for her was important just to having fun. And people should take a bit more courage, like experimenting, of expressing, instead of living of always this kind of a linear way of thinking.
Yeah. Taking more courage, that's a nice place to end. Thank you so much, Luca, for talking to me. You've been listening to In Talks with me, Danielle Radoichin. The sound and theme music is by Woolby Productions, and the artwork is by Patrick Wall. If you enjoyed this episode, please pass it on to someone who you think might also like it. Please subscribe and leave a review. To pitch for guest ideas, you can DM me via my socials at Danielle Radoichin. Thanks for listening.